The Louisville Cardinals have a chance to prove themselves against the 6th-ranked Miami Hurricanes on Saturday.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what is going on, everyone? Welcome into this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I want to take this time to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Today's episode of the show was brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Louisville has a great opportunity to prove themselves and prove to the country that they are indeed as good as advertised when they take on the 6th-ranked Miami Hurricanes on Saturday at home. We'll discuss what is at stake with a win and a loss. We'll talk about the keys to victory, how Louisville needs to control the line of scrimmage on both sides, limit what Cam Ward can do on Saturday, make life tough for him, and much more. And then we'll dive into a weekly mailbag segment to close things out on this Wednesday edition of the show. This game is a prove-it game for the Louisville Cardinals. With the victory, they can prove not only to the fan base, not only to the conference, but to the country as a whole that, hey, look, we are still the good team that we were believed to be early on in the season, because things really haven't gone Louisville's way for the most part. It hasn't been an extremely convincing first half of the schedule. I mean, you're 4-2. You lost to Notre Dame. You can say shoulda, coulda, woulda all you want. You should have beat Notre Dame, should have beat SMU. The reality is that you didn't. You are who your record says that you are. And even in a couple of these victories, Georgia Tech and Virginia, it really hasn't been all that convincing. You beat Georgia Tech by 11 to 12 points, which was what you were supposed to. But Virginia, you had to escape Charlottesville with a 24-20 victory. You really didn't play all that great in either of the two ACC wins that you have. Yes, you dominated Austin Peay, Jacksonville State, but ultimately you've gotten to 4-2. Hasn't really been all that convincing. And it has a lot of fans, not only within the Louisville fan base, but also around the conference, around the country, wondering, how good is this Louisville team? Well, you have an opportunity on Saturday to sort of flip the narrative. You go from being, well, Louisville could be good, but you would then go to, well, Louisville's a good team because they beat Miami at home. Now, Miami hasn't really been this juggernaut team. They're 6-0. They've handled everything on their schedule, which deserves a good amount of credit. But the games against Virginia Tech and Cal haven't really been all that convincing. They've escaped with victories. They've had to come from behind to get victories. Now, like I said, there is a certain level of credit you need to give a team for being able to overcome that adversity, sort of like Louisville did in 2023. Miami has handled the teams on their schedule. It wouldn't be far-fetched to suggest that Louisville is the best team that they will have played up to this point on their schedule, but the Cardinals will need to prove it. So it's very different than the stance. It's very different than the stance that we've taken through the first, 5 of 6 games, because Louisville's been favored to win 5 of the 6 that they played. So it's been a lot of, Louisville doesn't have much to gain other than getting a win, and they've got a considerable amount to lose. Well, you flip that on its head, because with a win, I think that you can do 3 things. Number one, obviously, it's a prove-it game. You would prove to a lot of people out there that, hey, look, Louisville's a good team. They just had somewhat of a slow start, right? Well, then what you can also do, it's a great opportunity to build momentum. Virginia, look, I said it multiple times. You're not turning the season around and changing the dynamic of the season with one singular win against Virginia, a team that you were supposed to beat, right? But you turn the ship in the right direction to give you the opportunity to sort of, like, you look back to 2022, right? Let's go back to 2022. Louisville had an opportunity to turn the season around against Virginia. They did. And then Wake Forest, the top 10 team, came to town, and you beat them. It's sort of like eerily similar to where, you beat Virginia on the road. Now you get an opportunity to show, hey, look, things are so much better. So it's an opportunity to build up momentum as you head into the last part of the schedule, trying to salvage the season, trying to make the most out of the adversity that you faced thus far. And then the third aspect of it, I don't really want to put the cart before the horse, but with a win over Miami, you would then sort of revitalize the ACC hopes. Because if you beat the top team in the conference right now, then you put yourself in a very interesting situation because, yes, you'll have Pittsburgh, which Louisville might be favored to win that game by the time that game rolls around, Boston College on the road, and also Stanford. But that would make that matchup on the road against Clemson that much more important and could get the ACC title hopes revitalized. Now, I don't want to put the cart before the horse here, but if you beat Miami, that's ultimately going to become a topic of conversation just honestly by default, which will make that SMU loss even more frustrating. Not as frustrating as the Pittsburgh loss last year, but pretty damn frustrating. So there's a lot on the line here if you were to get the win. To flip the script, you want to talk about what happens if you lose. In the grand scheme, I think that you make the ACC title aspirations that much more difficult. You pretty much all but kind of close that door. You're favored, you're supposed to lose this game according to FanDuel. FanDuel has Miami as anywhere from a 3.5 to 4.5 point favorite currently, which I know some think it's too low, which I'm kind of on the fence here. I don't know what to expect with this game, full transparency. It's not the end of the world because this is going to be the best offense that you will play all season. Arguably, I say arguably because I think Clemson is the best team that you will play for the remainder of the year, but Miami might be the ACC champion. They might run the table in conference play, or they might run the table overall and get to 12-0, 13-0 maybe. There's really, like I say this, like loss is not a big deal. Yes, losing another game makes things a little bit more challenging. You get closer to being on the verge of bowl eligibility or being in the question of that. I don't think a loss to Miami, a team that you're supposed to lose to, is the end of the world. What I do think is important here is if Louisville does indeed lose, how did they lose? That's the main thing. If you go out and you lose to Miami by, let's say, 10 points or under 10 points, like I don't think it's one of those, the sky is falling reaction is needed. But let's say you go out to Miami, Cam Ward does whatever he does whatever he pleases. Miami's defense controls the line of scrimmage. Louisville's offense isn't able to get going. Let's say Miami wins this game in blowout fashion. Then you're having I think, somewhat completely different conversation saying, okay, look, Virginia Tech gave Miami all they could handle in Coral Gables. California had Miami on the ropes, and if California didn't have a complete disastrous implosion, they would have won. If Louisville comes out and gets boat raced, if they get demolished, I think that hurts the narrative. I think that if you lose a close game to Miami, I don't think it changes much because everyone expects Louisville to lose this game, at least on paper. I'm also not, I don't want this to come across as me being complacent with a loss. Like if we lose this game close, I'm not going to be satisfied. That's just not how I'm wired. Like my DNA doesn't allow me to find many moral victories. Like if we lose to Miami by 3, I'm like, oh yeah, that's okay. No, losing a game is not okay, especially for a team that was supposed to have college football playoff aspirations. Like I refuse to believe that they've thrown in the towel yet. And maybe this is just the blind optimism for me. And maybe this is the homerism and the biased fan that's speaking to you right now. But I just refuse to willingly lose a game and be able to draw some moral confidence from it. Like that's not going to happen. In fact, it's probably going to be the opposite, suggesting that, yeah, then Boston College becomes that much more important because it's not a guarantee that you're going to be bowl eligible at the end of the season. And even if you get to 6-6, 7-5, is that truly okay for you all? Because let me be honest, I predicted maybe 9 to 10 victories at the end of this season. And there were some fans that called me pessimistic and bad news Dalton for saying that 9 wins is in question, that there should be more. So I don't believe that the expectations have changed just yet. Obviously, they had to reflect a little bit of what we've seen, but are you ready to throw in the towel just yet and change your mindset that quickly? Again, not the end of the world with a loss, but so much to gain with the victory. How does Louisville get there? What do the Cardinals need to do to be victorious over Mario Cristobal's Hurricanes? A lot of it has to do with defending Cam Ward and protecting Tyler Shough. When we come back, we'll explain just what I mean. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Game Time. I am a huge fan of live basketball games. The sound from the court, the feel of the crowd. I'm excited about the KFC Yum Center once again being packed. I'm so very ready. Basketball season less than a month away. If you're like me, you're already trying to coordinate ticket purchases. And the way that I do it now and will always do it that you need to jump on board is with Game Time. When you download the app, you'll get all of the amazing features, the all-in pricing feature that you can toggle on to remove the surprise fees at checkout, the panoramic views from your seats, the ticket protections that you have with Game Time rival none across the industry, and the lowest price guarantee, which means if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Cardinal fans, I want to take this time again, as I always do, to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville, free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. Just a quick housekeeping update. Only 2 episodes remain for this week. I'm trying to space them out because I am going to Los Angeles at the end of next week. So I'm trying to get everything squared away in terms of content scheduling. So there will be this episode. And then on Thursday, tomorrow, there will be a Locked On crossover special between me and Locked On Canes host Alex Dono. So just be on the lookout for that. There will be no Friday episode this week, but we're going to have all your preparation on this episode and the next one. So just a heads up. 3 keys to victory for the Louisville Cardinals, and a lot of it pertains to the line of scrimmage. We'll start out with don't let Cam Ward improvise. Cam Ward is right there in the Heisman hopeful discussion. He is number 1 in the country in passing yards per game. He's averaging a wild 369.83 yards per game through the air. I know a lot of people want to talk about Cam Ward as a dual threat quarterback, although the statistics really don't suggest that that is the case. Never really in his career. He's always been great around the goal line. I mean, he has almost 20 rushing touchdowns in his career, but he only has 161 yards rushing. Now, 50 yards of sack yardage is included in that, which is the stupidest thing. Like, can we stop including sack yardage and rushing totals? Like, let's adopt what the NFL is doing, because it skews how good a quarterback can be in running the football. Now, Ward is dangerous with his legs. We've seen when plays break down, he has no problem with getting through the line of scrimmage and nonchalantly running to extend drives, which it's so impressive to me how unfazed Cam Ward is. Like, when pressure happens, he's so cool, calm, and collected. So that's what I say here is that you can't let Cam Ward improvise, because of the quarterbacks that Louisville plays on this schedule, he is so good with controlled chaos. Like, it's almost Lamar Jackson-esque that when the pocket breaks down, when the pressure comes, when he has to extend plays, he does so nonchalantly, and it almost looks effortless. And he's a great passer. He can throw on the run. He can stand in the pocket and deliver a good strike. And he has some really good receivers with Xavier Restrepo, Jacoby George, Isaiah Horton. He also has Elijah Arroyo at tight end, Elijah Lofton, Samuel Brown. I mean, there's so many different options that he has to throw to. This is the best offense that Louisville will play. They have to do a good job of not only getting pressure on Cam Ward, they have to make sure that that turns into sacks, and they put Miami into third and long situations and force life to be challenging for Cam Ward, force some turnovers. Because if you put it this way, the worst thing you could do is give him time to throw the football or give him lanes to be able to escape the pocket and either extend drives with his legs or with his arm, because he will do it. He's one of the best improvisers in the country. And it's almost like when chaos ensues or when chaos arrives, Cam Ward's like, okay, here you go, 20-yard gain downfield. If you let Cam Ward throw all over the field, if you let him get out and do whatever he wants to do, it's going to be a long day. It's going to be a very long day. And Louisville's defense has to get off the field. The way you do that is you stay poised. You don't, make many mistakes. You complete tackles. You don't miss tackles. And you get some sacks on Cam Ward. Also, to play the other side, you have to protect Tyler Shough. It's been almost a redundant point up until this point, but right tackle has been an issue. Left tackle Monroe Mills is out. So you have to be better in protecting him on the boundaries. And you're facing a really good defensive line. That's what I've kind of talked about. Being scared is that Louisville has Miami, Clemson, and Kentucky still left to go on the schedule. The Hurricanes are 7th in the country in total sacks. They're averaging over 3 sacks a game. You talk about Ruben Bain, Tyler Barron, Simeon Barrow, multiple solid pieces on the defensive line, but also you have a really good linebacking core that you have to focus on with Miami. I mean, you have, I think it's Francisco Maigoa. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Forgive me for that. Wesley Basainth. Again, I'm not really sure how to pronounce his name, so forgive me. But, I mean, Tyler Barron has 4.5 sacks. Simeon Barrow Jr. has 3.5. Elijah Alston, 2.5. Malik Bryant, 1.5. Akeem Mesidor, 1.5. So there are many pieces on that Miami front seven that can make life challenging for Tyler Shough. And if you do not give him enough time to throw the football, it's going to be a very long day. Like, this is even more of a point in this game than it was against Notre Dame. Like, you're going to have more of a challenge getting after the quarterback and completing sacks because Cam Ward can throw the ball all over the field. And also, on the offensive line side, you don't have Monroe Mills. You have an offensive line that has struggled a good amount this season. This is their largest test to date. And if they want a chance to win this game, they have to give Tyler Shough some protection. I look for some quick throws. They're going to incorporate a lot of misdirection. Hopefully, the rushing aspect becomes effective because then you can run at the pass rushers. And now Tyler Barron is a really good run defender. So it is what it is. So that is going to be a focal point. The third, capitalize on offense. Louisville's offense has done a great job of hamstringing themselves with penalties, with some turnovers here and there, with drops, you name it. That can't happen this week. Louisville has to do a good job of capitalizing on offense, getting into the red zone, getting points on drives. One thing you can't do is get into Miami territory and then stall out to where you have to punt on a short field. No, you have to score here because Miami's going to score. This isn't a game that you're probably going to win 24-20. If you win this game, it's because you've scored probably over 30 points. That's the recipe to defeat Miami. You do what you can to get them off the field, force turnovers, but you have to score. And a lot of it has to be touchdowns. This has to be the best game that Louisville's offense has played all season. This has to be the game to where Tyler Shough airs the ball out, the rushing attack gets going, the offensive line's offering protection. And like Keith Artoff mentioned yesterday on the show, or Monday night on the show, there has to be a level of misdirection and aspects that we haven't seen to where it's almost gimmicky but you have to keep this defense on their toes because if you do not, you will lose. It's as simple as that. 3 keys to victory here. Don't let Cam Ward improvise. Protect Tyler Shough. Capitalize on offense. It's as simple as that. A lot of this game is going to be won in the trenches on both sides for the Louisville Cardinals. When we come back, a lot of great mailbag questions, including my overall thoughts on this matchup. Like I said, coming up on the next segment of Locked On Louisville. NFL fans, I know the season has already started, but you can start your season with a large return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. If you visit FanDuel.com, you can check out all the player props and much more. Right now, Louisville is about a 4.5-point underdog to the Miami Hurricanes. Let me know what you all think about that in the comments below. Check out all the player props and much, much more on FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Usually I like to do the mailbag questions early on in the week, but sometimes that's just not the way the cookie crumbles. There are some great questions that I would like to take the time to answer. Don't want to ignore these. And it begins with the Miami game. What are your overall thoughts on this Miami game? Is this a type of game that you feel confident with Jeff Brom? Rick Bozich put out an article on Wednesday about Jeff Brom pulling off upsets in October. And I didn't realize how many upsets he has pulled off against ranked teams as the head coach of Purdue and even Western Kentucky. This is the type of game that Jeff Brom's teams usually live for. Like, Purdue has been such a giant slayer when he was the head coach, when they played Ohio State, when they played Minnesota. I want to say Penn State. I know they defeated another team, but this is the team where, Purdue was an underdog. They got up for this game. They might not have had the greatest defense, but they made plays when they needed to. The offense might not have had the personnel that the other teams had, but they were sort of gimmicky. They used a lot of quick screens, a lot of tempo, a lot of misdirection, getting their playmakers the ball out in space. And they were always on upset alert for other teams. And so far, since Notre Dame, I haven't seen Louisville get up for those types of games. That's what I want to see from a Jeff Brom team is, you're not the underdog anymore in that capacity. Yes, you have a better team on paper, but why can't you have that same mindset? Louisville has yet to have a ton of juice on the sideline. Get amped up. You're playing the number 6 team in the country, for Christ's sake. Get amped up. Play up to your level of competition. Get the win. Get the upset. That's what I want to see. We talk about, Jeff Brom has shied away from what he's done at other programs. I don't know how valid that is, but at the same time, I don't care. Bring that same energy. One thing about a Brom team that I've seen when he was at Purdue is those teams would run through walls for him. They beat teams they weren't supposed to beat. They beat top 10 teams. Beat a top 10 team this week. That's the way I'm looking at it. Moving right on along, Ja'Cory Brooks and Isaac Brown will face their hometown teams this upcoming week. Are you predicting big performances from both of them? I am. I think Isaac Brown's going to have a big game. I think Ja'Cory Brooks is going to continue to show that not one defensive back that he's played can check him one-on-one. So I do think that Isaac Brown and Ja'Cory Brooks have large games. I'm looking for Colin Lacey and the tight end room to have a large game because, like Jamari Thrash last season, he needs someone to step up alongside of him. Who's that going to be alongside Ja'Cory Brooks? Is it going to be Colin Lacey? Is it going to be Amari Huggins-Bruce? What about Chris Bell? What about Jamari Johnson? What about Mark Redmond? You need to have multiple players step up alongside Ja'Cory Brooks. So the thought shouldn't be, is Ja'Cory going to step up? No, you need other players to step up as well. Basketball only got 4 votes in the first AP poll. I felt like they should have been ranked What are your thoughts on that? I'm okay with not being thrown into the top 25 currently. I mean, this is a prove-it year for Louisville basketball. This is a prove-it year for Pat Kelsey. So they have a really tough non-conference schedule. They're going to have every opportunity to prove to the rest of the country, to prove to the AP voters that, hey, look, yes, we are as good as advertised. We belong in the top 25. They're going to have every opportunity. It's sort of like football. I'm not really caught up in preseason voting or anything like that, preseason rankings or even preseason awards, because you have a whole season to prove to the voters that you belong. And if you do, they're going to put you in those rankings. So again, I'm okay with it. It just is what it is. Do you think the fans deserve some blame for Louisville's home woes over the past couple of home games? No. I really don't know where this question is going. No. Fans aren't to blame. Fans are never to blame for a team's performances. Like that's sort of a thing for me that I don't know where that comes from really. I know that some believe it to be a talking point. No disrespect, it's just not one for me. Like I won't really ever blame fans for a performance. Now, I do think that, if fans aren't bringing a good atmosphere, I do think that, you can have a conversation about the fan base somewhat, but I'm not going to put it this way, I'm not going to blame the fans for losing to SMU or losing to Kentucky or almost losing to Georgia Tech. You know what I'm saying? That's just kind of where I'm at with that. Predict Louisville's record the remaining way with 6 games to go. Very interesting. I've gone back and forth here. 6 games remaining. Most of them are on the road. You have 4 road games, 2 home games. Miami at home, at Boston College, at Clemson, at Stanford, Pittsburgh at home, at Kentucky. I think you beat Boston College. I think you beat Stanford. That'll put you at bowl eligibility. You then have Miami, Clemson, Kentucky, and Pittsburgh. For the record, I do think that they're going to lose to Miami and Clemson, and I think that they're going to split Pittsburgh and Kentucky. So I'm going to put them at 7-5 for the season. It's just so hard with that loss to SMU. Makes things a little bit more challenging, and nothing that I've seen from the team through the first 6 weeks has given me a ton of confidence that I can say for certain on a prediction for the record that they're going to beat one of Miami or Clemson, because at this point it's just really challenging to see that. I do think that they're going to handle business in Boston and in Southern California, but right now 7-5 is kind of where I have them at. So that is going to wrap up this Wednesday edition of the show. Like I said, no Friday show. We'll continue preview with Locked On Canes host Alex Dono with a podcast crossover, so be sure to tune into that. On Thursday, there will be a new episode of Around the ACC with DP, a show that I've started on the Cardinals Sports Zone podcast network. Be sure to tune into that on Thursday or Friday. That's going to wrap up this episode of the show. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here